Welcome back, everybody, to the DanJohnUniversity.com podcast. I'm Dan John. This is episode 320. Each and every week, I sit down here and answer your questions. And as always, if you have a question, please send them to the podcast at this address, podcast@DanJohnUniversity.com. I love answering the questions. We have a fun set today. And honestly, sometimes I think it's almost like people conspire, because I've noticed recently that the questions are coming in, like I'll have a week of a bunch of armor building formula questions. I'll have this week have a couple of machine questions. And I just think it's kind of funny. It just seems like I'll read through and it's like, because I haven't seen some of these questions in a long, long time, machines, and 2 questions in 1 week. So let's get started. We got a fun question from Tom. Tom says this: a few weeks ago on the podcast, you were talking about the Mount Rushmore of your fitness heroes, which I think included Percy Cerruti. It got me thinking about a kettlebell version of Mount Rushmore and who might be on there. I would be interested in your perspective. Could it be, for example, Dan John, Pavel, Jeff Newport, and Pat Flynn? All kettlebell heroes, in my opinion. This does, however, seem a bit like a sausage fest. I am sure there must be some female kettlebells who I'm unaware of, but up to you. Well, he's going to ask an open-ended question, but what is my Mount Rushmore of kettlebells? Well, mine's going to be different. And again, it is interesting because, you mentioned, sometimes what's missing, and I apologize for that, but this is just mine. This is what I thought of. My interest in kettlebells goes back to when my brother Richard drove me to track and field news when I was a 9th grade discus thrower. I was 118 pounds of muscle, and we like to think. And he got this book for me, not this particular edition, because the edition I have literally fell apart. But this is Ken Doherty's Track and Field Omni book. And this is where I first heard about Coach Ralph Maughan at the Utah State University. And this is when I decided to go to Utah State as a, 13, 14-year-old. I said, that's where I want to go, and I want to throw for Ralph Maughan. But what's in this book, which is kind of fun, is he has a whole bunch of pictures in the book from the Soviets. And this here is a deficit deadlift. So if anybody decided to have invented this has to go back to the 60s. This is a kettlebell toss. There's a whole bunch of sandbag exercises in here. There are some traditional bodybuilding exercises and all the rest. This is an interesting, around the world kettlebell exercise, sandbag throws. This is a grip exercise where you pick up sandbags, and another grip exercise in there where you did a roller with kettlebells. And the reason I bring that up is that the first time I'd ever seen kettlebells. And I had seen something similar in strength and health called swing bells. And when I first met Dick Notmeyer, he was the one who really told me that, doing swings correctly was one of the best ways to get your heart rate high. And it's funny because, that not much has changed. So my first one for me personally is J.K. Doherty, because he was able to utilize the Soviet materials. And of course, so much of the Soviet materials was either literally just made up or stolen from other people. So it's always hard to get a handle on what really is appropriate. But they certainly did utilize those exercises. Had a fun conversation one time with Yuri Sadiq, the late great Yuri Sadiq, still the world record holder in the hammer. And I asked him about kettlebells, and he just waved it off like, no, those are, and he said really kind of derisive things about kettlebells. And then the next day, one of my athletes at discus camp showed me a picture of him training with kettlebells, which I thought was just kind of funny. So, I can never get a read on what really was going on. But for me, J.K. Doherty's book really opened my eyes about what this thing was. The second one would be the 2 Soviet hammer throwers. I think one was called Dmitriev, but and they were at College of San Mateo when I was in basically junior college, I think. They used to have that USA-USSR meet and I can't remember exactly whether it was 75 or 76. It could have been 77 or 78. But we went down because we heard they were throwing, and they really weren't throwing. But what the one guy was doing was walking around the field with this piece of metal with a handle on it. And he was doing all these various throws and tosses and stuff. And I mean, all kinds. And then later, of course, the West German javelin throwers would use those same kinds of things. Now, I think what's interesting is in the historical record, American throwers were using kettlebells again, but I think whoever got the information misheard, because I think the word was, they said these are poods, which is the weight for kettlebells. But of course, the American audience heard it as puds. So when I was throwing in college, a lot of the schools were using these 20-pound, they almost look like, honestly, like paint cans, very thin wire handle with just basically, in some places made their own with cement, and they weren't very good, but they would use them for throwing drills. And then of course, so I would put J.K. Doherty, the Soviet hammer throwers, because they really opened my eyes that you can do a lot more than just lift and throw. You can also, throw heavy implements, which of course changed the way I coach for sure. And then of course I'd have to put Pavel and John Duquesne up there, because, and I know a lot of people online, like to, I can't remember what the cool kids say nowadays, pour smoke on it, pour water. I know a lot of people online like to poke fun at John and Pavel, but without them, the modern kettlebell would not be around. And I don't want to hear anybody argue with it, because, maybe there was sport in certain places, but it wasn't big. And it wasn't popular, and it was John and Pavel who brought it. And the first kettlebell book, when you go back and read it, there's a lot of good information. I think it's the Russian Kettlebell Challenge, RKC. There's a lot of information on the bent press and the snatch, two great exercises, but I would never. I don't know how many people in the world would program that. And then, of course, Enter the Kettlebell, which I was part of. I always thought Return of the Kettlebell was very good, but I think the standards Pavel set were really hard for a lot of people, and but I that would be my four. Those are the people who influenced me the most. Obviously, I've had dozens of other people help me out. Brett Jones was my team leader at the San Jose RKC, and I always thought he was really good to work with. Another person, my partner, Tim Anderson at the CKFMS, really helped me out, because just a lot of different reasons. But there's just, I hate to forget, I don't want to. There were just so many great people in the early days of kettlebells that helped out. And Steve Cotter, of course, did a workshop at my school for me. I had great conversations with Steve Maxwell. There's just so many. That whole early group was just phenomenal to work with. So insightful. Mark Chang, who famously picked me up and drove me around at one of the workshops. And we just had a delightful time. So, but those would be my four: J.K. Doherty, the Soviet throwers, and then Pavel and John. Those are mine, and there is no right or wrong. Before I get too far on the women's side, I sure got a lot out of working with Delane Ross, and there's quite a few others. Whole bunch of my assistants, and I'm thinking about that crew we down had at the San Jose RKC with Chris and Chris, and we had that great group of helpers, Taylor Lewis and Lacey and Anne. Was great. So hats off to so many people, and I really appreciate all of you. I've done my best to stay in the kettlebell communities. I really like the fact that so many people in the kettlebells now are kind of busy people who train in their home, and the kettlebell is their home gym. So hats off to you, because I know how hard it is when you've got kids and jobs and life. And the season changing, and you have to go from mowing your lawn to shoveling your walk in a weekend. So and then still try to get a lift in. So hey, there's mine, Tom, and fun question. I appreciate that. Really fun question. We've got a question from Ed. Ed says, it's a very quick question. I have heard you mention isometric holds at the bottom of the goblet squat and the benefits for the midsection. Yeah, so there's in the new armor building formula book that I just came out with, I discuss two of my favorite ways to build up the abdominal wall in the seat in the bottom of a goblet squat. One is goblet squat with curls, and of course when people say, Dan, where do you get those armacondas? That's my secret exercise. And the other one, this exercise in my gym is called a heartbeat. You're holding the bell by the horns and you pop it in and out, like a punch, maybe, boom, And at the seat at the bottom, you do 10 heartbeats, and you'll really teach your abdominal wall what it's supposed to do. But there's another thing we have this little test. That's funny. This was a thing we were doing every week. I got to tell you, I would even say a couple of years. We had the 3-minute and the 6-minute test. The 6-minute is twice as long as the 3-minute, in case you have a question. But the idea of that was is that you can do anything. We use an analog clock. I can't believe I called it an analog. But, with a second hand. So when the second hand hits 12, you do a squat, you sit right back down on the bottom. When the second hand hits the 6, you do a squat and you sit right back down. So if you do the 3-minute, you're going to, every 30 seconds, you do a squat. And it is interesting because it's the accumulation of this that's the real problem. You're not doing very many squats. It's probably in 3 minutes, it'd be one more than, so it'd be 6 or 7 squats, depending on if you start with a squat and finish with a squat, which we do. Now at the 6-minute one, I got to tell you, it's not a lot of squats, but it's that time under tension at the bottom that I think is so helpful. So there's 3 ideas for you, Ed. Bottom position goblet squat with curls. Not only do you build your pythons, but you also teach your whole body what it is to do what Tim Anderson calls that reflexive strength. Every time you do a curl, your entire body has to respond to that movement. With heartbeats, it's a lot faster. And I think you're actually training the ab wall the way it should be. The abs are, of course, they should be a fast twitch muscle fiber. I think the best way to train abs is vomiting. Sneezing is another good way. You want the ab wall to snap. That's why javelin throwers tend to have such great abs. So that's another one. And then of course, this 3 or 6 minute drill. For those of you who think, you listen to me and you say, oh, that's a good idea. Try the 3 minutes. So, every 30 seconds you stand up and then squat right back down for 3 minutes. It is so much harder than it sounds when I say it out loud, but it really does. I think sometimes, Ed and gentle listeners, I think sometimes taking more time to really push that whole core column, whatever you want to call it this week, to really push it, to remind it that it's constantly trying to hold on to that reflexive strength, I think is a real valuable tool to master. So thank you. Easy question, and thank you. Neil asks a question, is there such a thing as too much offset in your offset kettlebell training? So Neil has a 28 kilo bell and a 4 kilo bell. And generally, I'll just say this. In my experience, I think it should be 2 to 1. So if you're using the 32 in your left hand, you should have the 16 in your right hand. If you're doing the 20, the 10, the 24, the 12, okay? But the 28 and the 4, I'm not going to say it doesn't have any value. No value. This has no value. I'm not going to say that. Because I think especially if you're doing something like the armor building complex, you could do double 16s, but by doing the 28 and the 4, you're going to be chasing some qualities with that massive imbalance. Now, let me just say this. Generally, I would recommend that you just stay in that 2 to 1 ratio, If you have a 24 here, you have a 12 here, okay? And reverse it, obviously. However, as a fun, let's see how this goes, Neil, I think that might be value. And if that's all you have, that's all you have. And he also mentions, should I just do the single bell version? The single bell version with 28s is a good load, and it might work out really well. But I do want you to try the ABCs with the 28 and the 4. Obviously, after each round, you'll set the bells on the ground and then step to the other side so the hands will switch. But one thing I picked up, we haven't done this because we've been in a different program for a while, but we do this thing called conga lines. So I have 36 kettlebells. So you take all 36 and you randomly put them out. So I'm looking out on out of the front of my house. There's my driveway right there, and there's my sidewalk. So we'll put the 36 all the way down to the fire hydrant over there, and random. And one time we had the 48 kilo bell next to the 4 kilo bell, and we were doing clean and press. So if you're going to do single side, always have odd numbers. So pull a bell out, so you have 35 or 25 or 5, whatever. The reason is that when you finish that, you don't have to think. You just start with the other arm, and you'll keep your reps balanced. But you walk up to the 48 and you clean it, and if you can, you press it. You put it down. Step over. Now with my left hand, I got the 4. Well, when I was first learning kettlebells, we used to talk about, taming the kettlebell, taming the arc. And one of the things you'll find out when you have those hugely different loads is that you have to, you have to play like the old stereos we used to have. They had like 3 buttons. You go like this, and if you got it right, you wouldn't have any scratches on the record. If you got it right, you wouldn't get screeching sounds. You have to kind of tune in yourself after those reps. So with 20s, 24s, for most people, that is their more natural boom. When you get to the 48s, you're probably you hinge a little deeper. But when you get to the 4, you got to, if you hinge and then hit it, that 4 is going to, on a clean, knock you over with all of its speed. I like the idea, generally 2 to 1, but in your case, try it out. Let me know how it goes, Neil. Thank you. Okay, we have a question from Michael. Michael says this: I am 77 years old, 6'2", 270, former Division I football player and rugby player so long ago. I have conditioned and weight trained off and on over the years, but for the last 3 years, I have been dealing with a significant medical issue with no weight training or conditioning. This amounted to a loss of muscle and bone mass and a significant weight gain. I'm normally about 235. Yeah, Michael, I'd like to see that weight come down. Yeah. I've started to get back into it. I'm starting out using machines at the gym. I heard you say in a most recent podcast that you just obtained a leg extension machine. I'm considering doing this as well, as generally a weight to use those machines in the gym. And then Michael asked me if I'll talk about the brand. So I like machines, folks. I do. Now, if you're a performance athlete, it's funny when people destroy, I'm sure you can take research and destroy it enough to prove that hypertrophy work helps with elite performance. But I always thought that elite performance leads to looking good on the beach. You don't need to train hypertrophy for a 400-meter runner. They're getting all the fat burning they want every time they run the race. But I like machines, and I think every athlete might be well served by anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks a year of training on machines. Obviously, that would be in the deep off season, maybe the weeks after your season. And one of the reasons I like it so much is that you're moving weights. When I do leg extensions, I get that great lactic acid burn. I'm getting the lactic acid burn. I get the pump, getting the bump. I like it. I also like it at certain times in your life when you're trying to do multiple things. So In the last year for my gym, I've bought a number of pieces of equipment that I'm not sure I would have purchased back in my career. So the brand I use, Michael, and anybody who buys it, make sure they. So I bought the one from Titan, Titan, and I bought it because my friend Tim Anderson recommended it. So far, so good. I did buy a cheaper one, and I regretted that. One of the problems I do have with the Titan is it's too smooth. So I really have to just keep adding more and more plates. Oh, yeah, no. Woe is me. I'm getting too strong. Oh, and I'm too pretty. And I have too much money and my car is too, yeah. The complaints. Oh, I'm only in first class. But I'm a big fan of machines for all kinds of purpose. Where you're at in your life, Michael, with this 35-pound weight gain, I would suggest lifting weights on the machine 3 days a week. But man, what are your calories? I got to know what your calories are, and I got to know what your goal weight is. If you use at your height 6'2", you probably should be weighing. If you're using Brad Pilon's numbers, you probably should be weighing what, to 219, 220 at the heaviest. That's I'm not good at the math, but if you use Greg O'Gallagher's, say you want to weigh 220, you multiply that by 13. That's where your calories should kind of be. That's a real simple formula. There's millions of formulas online. I found one the other day that had, it came with a generator and it worked out. It was funny because after I did all the math with the little thing online, my coach recommends 2,600 calories a day. And this little magic machine gave me 2,600 calories a day. Actually, recently I'm moving down to 2,500, but that's just because I want to get a little bit lighter. So for you, Michael, machines 3 days a week, I would, whatever system you use on machines, generally with legs on machines, I like to go into the mid 20s because I just don't get that much out of like I was saying not long ago, I think on this podcast, I've never heard anyone doing triples on a leg curl. I just don't think you would get that much out of it, I think. But for me, I like to be in the 20s on the leg work because that's just a natural place for me. Generally, in most gyms, I can max out the leg extension machine if it's a weight stack. So you just got to get the reps up. Up at Westminster, I used to do a whole little series twice a week, and basically to help my joints. That was fun, but again, it was always in the 20s. For the upper body, I do think with machines, you can go a little bit higher. Whereas, say, traditionally, I would say that the most value comes between the 5 and 12 rep range for most people, for most circumstances. With machines, you could probably go 8 to 20 reps and get the benefits because the machine does a lot of the work for you. It does stabilize for you, and it is balance for you. It's the old thing, we talked about this many times, that if you have 200-pound dumbbells and you go to failure with 200-pound dumbbells, or kilos, it doesn't matter, and then write down those numbers and then take 200 pounds in the barbell and go out, you'll get many more reps with the barbell. Then when you're fresh or whatever, you do that to a machine, you'll get lots more reps on the machine. So just remember that the machines are a little bit easier. I would like to hear your calories. I'd like to hear about your walking, and I'd love to hear about your sleep at age 77, because those are the things you need to focus on, Michael, as much as whether or not what leg extension machine I buy. In the last year, I have a new rack, a new adjustable incline bench, new leg extension, and I am training a little bit more bodybuilder-like because, being 68, same world you're at, Michael. So I like what you're doing, but let's talk calories and steps. Okay, thank you. Andreas asks a fairly long question, but let's go. I have a question regarding your suggested assistance work when running Jim Wendler's 531 to build a strong overhead press. I'm currently running 5x531 variation from his Forever book. It's a mix of his original 531 programming and a 5x5, okay? And do it 3 days a week: front squat, trap bar deadlift, and standing military press. Okay. One of my goals is to build body weight press in the long run. Therefore, I wanted to ask, what would be your suggestive assistant work in helping build a strong press, provided that in 531, you only train once a week? I am currently quite weak. He's a 26-year-old, 70 kilos, 154 pounds, 177 centimeters, normal height. With following weights: standing military press, 1 rep max, 40 kilo, deadlift 75, 165 for 5, front squat 50, 110 for 3. As I work in law, I live a quite sedentary lifestyle, but on average aim to hit 10,000 steps a day. Well, good for you. Well, first off, I love Jim's work, but I'm wondering if, Andreas, is that one day a week of working the overhead press is just not enough. Jim's programs are amazing for American football, and my brother Gary loves it, and I'm a big fan. But you might need to press more, and that's the understatement of the week. But with your military being only a single at 40, lifting one day a week, I just don't think you're going to have the appropriate amount of time under tension or load that's going to help you progress upwards. Clearly, I think you need to increase the number of times you press a week. And I would say overhead press. With your deadlift and your front squat, there are all kinds of standard programs you can use. One program, if you can find it, there was because you're doing 3 exercises, his name is Stefan Kort. STEFANKORTE. And he's famous for the 3x3x3x3 template, is the way I explain it. 3 sets of 3, 3 exercises, 3 days a week. And as your numbers come up, and he has a very organized, you wouldn't need to do it. You would not need to do percents on this. But you would lift weights for you, 3 sets of 3, 3 days a week. So you do 3 sets of military for 3. Okay, 3 sets of front squat for 3, 3 deadlifts. Now, next week you're going to add a little bit more. Next week you're going to add a little bit more. Next week you're going to add a little bit more. And then you can go in a couple directions. One, you can add another day a week, which I like because that's more easy strength. Or you add another session, or you can add more sets. But the idea is, I think you need to get yourself on a much more traditional new person program. 5 sets of 5, 3 sets of 8. You just need more practice under the barbell. Jim's programs are great. They're great. But sometimes for people who are just coming up, they just need more time with the bar. Personally, the front squat, trap bar, deadlift, and standing military press, those 3 choices are pretty good. The only thing I might say is maybe do 5 by 5, 3 days a week with all 3 exercises. Maybe do 3 sets of 3, all 3 exercise 3, whatever works out best. Which brings me to this point I want to make sure I make. There's 2 workouts that really are kind of underappreciated but I've always found them really good for beginners. 3 sets of 5, and it's kind of its twin, 5 sets of 3. And I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but if you do week 1, now this isn't Court's and this isn't Jim's, it's just something I was thinking about to help you. If on week 1 you were to do 3 sets of 3 with those 3 exercises all 3 days and get a sense of things, okay. Next week, use the same load and do 3 sets of 5 and see if you can get those extra reps. The following week, go up a little bit, but go 5 sets of 3. 3 sets of 3, 3 sets of 5, 5 sets of 3, and then if you can, the 4th week, 5 sets of 5. Now, you can repeat that ad nauseum, or you can have a light 5th week where you do 3 sets of 8 with the lighter weight and just practice. But I'm convinced that in your case, you just need more training sessions per exercise. And I think it's true about all 3 of the lifts you shared with us. I hope that helps, and thank you. We got a question from Neil, and this is a tough one because I think a lot of us have been there. I'm in a position where we might move to a new house without a garage, and honestly, my wife and I are strapped for cash. I'm considering selling off my home gym. Any thoughts on this? Oh man, I hate it. I see you're strapped for cash. You hit, man. Anybody who's listening, who's ever gotten rid of, every time I get rid of some of my strength and health magazines or my lifting books, 1 week later, I'm like, oh, why did I give that away? Any thoughts on this? Equipment comes and goes, but ultimately I have to be able to provide for my family, correct? I'm just thinking of keeping my metal plates and 15-kilo bar that I don't mind leaving outside to rust, along with a kettlebell and just doing something like the armor building formula. Will I regret selling my nice bar and bumper plates and squat stands in the future? Well, you want the truth, Neil? Oh yeah, you're going to regret it. Oh, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Having said that, Kelly was 2 and Lindsay was 1 when the upper limit gym closed, and I ended up all the equipment I had in the world was a crappy bar and two 35s and a 25-pound weight, so I could get that load up to 165. I still have those plates. They're on my leg extension machine, and they are rusted through, man. So that's when I came up with the transformation program. It's when I first experimented with the Tabata protocol. I don't know if anybody else was doing it at the time, but when Tabata came out, I think I heard about it in 98, maybe 7, maybe. And I went in and I tried Tabata military presses. That was a disaster. And then I came up with the idea of doing Tabata front squats. And I really thought that had value. I don't do them anymore, and it's on my Naga list. I'm not going to do that again. But boy, if all you have is 95 pounds and you clean and then do as many front squats as you can in 20 seconds, put the bar on the ground, try to catch your breath, go again. Oh, that was tough. So, I went from a full gym to 165 pounds and still competed. Was it tough? Yeah, but it made this work. It made me think. So that was the real gift of this period. When I moved to California, I gave away all my bumper plates, all my bars, and I went to California with, I think, just 1 kettlebell. Yeah, that's all I had was the single kettlebell, the 28. And when I got back here to Utah and I started rebuilding my home gyms in 2012, it's taken me 13 years to get my gym back to where I like it to be. So basically I have 3 20-kilo Olympic bars. I have 1 15K bar, 36 kettlebells, 2 hip thrust machines, a leg extension, pull-up racks, big squat stand, incline, deficit deadlift, tons of stuff, bands and TRXs and everything else. But it took me 13 years to build it up. Having said so, what I'm saying is this: give yourself time when you decide to start expanding your gym back. Now, the nice thing is, I don't know when you're gonna sell all this stuff off and do all this, but when you get yourself in a situation where you can kind of start rebuilding the gym, I don't know, maybe there'll be a new piece of equipment or a new squat rack that's even better than the one you had. That's what happened in my case. Maybe you'll have more options. Remember, when I first started making my own home gyms, you still had to send a check in the mail to a company and then wait 8, 9, 10, 12 weeks for that piece of equipment to get to your house, and some guy with a bad attitude telling you needed help get the equipment off the truck. I don't know what a perfect home gym is, but I know this. If you have an ab wheel, very inexpensive, go get one. They're $10 at these, these places, these clothing places that that are always closing. A kettlebell, a suspension trainer of some kind, In fact, you can probably use the suspension trainer to do the ab wheel, but I just like the ab wheel better. But just those 3 things, you can do amazing stuff, amazing stuff. If you have this barbell and you decide to do the barbell armor building formula, with the weights you have, you could do that for years. The only problem is you have to do the armor building formula and do all those clean and presses, which I find very exhausting personally. But yeah, to help your family, and I say this with a heavy heart, you got to do what you got to do. But if all you have is the barbell, some plates, the kettlebell, you're going to be okay. You're going to be just fine. You're going to get it all done. In fact, I'm going to tell you from the heart, and you can tell I don't sell equipment, you'll probably make more progress with those limited options than you would with the fully blown gym. How do I know that? Because whenever I go to the gym that's right over there, I look at a lot of people who are on paper in the gym, but none of them are actually doing a damn thing. They're on their phones. They're that one guy who just lays on the leg curl machine. He lays on the leg curl machine typing. I don't know if he understands that you need to pull your heels to your butt to get any value out of the leg curl, but what do I know? So, bare minimum gym, well, the 110 pound or 50 kilo barbell set, if you're doing the armor building form, that's all you need. If you want to buy the 310, 140 kilo barbell Olympic set, that's all you'll ever need. If you buy a set of the classic kettlebells, that's all you ever need. If you add a suspension trainer and an ab wheel, that's all you'll ever need. It's what you do with the equipment, not the equipment itself. All right, that's enough for that. Fun question. Thank you. Steve has a question. I recently injured my hand, which will have me in a cast for a few months. That's a tough one. Hard. Things like tying your shoe and putting your belt on are a nightmare with a cast. I have read about your wrist injury and the dumbbell clean and press program you did at this time. Did you feel that caused you a lot of muscle asymmetries? Would you please talk about your training during this time? Yeah, man, that left wrist injury was bad. I've had a lot of surgeries, and I wouldn't say I'm bragging about it, but I'm proud of the fact that I had a long athletic career. And if you have an actual athletic career, your opponents in the sports, they hurt you. You get hurt. So I've had a lot of injuries. Playing American football, someone stepped on my foot with cleats, broke a toe, broke 5 pieces off my elbow playing American football. And this elbow broke this wrist in a whole bunch of pieces, Olympic lifting, hurt both fingers, and I still don't know how that one happened, but cut the ends off my fingers, shoulder surgeries, total hip replacements, knee surgery, hernia surgeries. But it's just part of the fun of being an athlete. So part of the fun of being an athlete too is to recover from these injuries. And I got great advice for anybody, anytime, who's injured. Go in the gym and find something you can do while you're trying to recover. When I was recovering from my total hip replacements, I was doing seated presses as soon as I could. When I got out of mini band and I started trying my best to just wake up those muscles again. Glute loops weren't around on my first one, but they were in my second. Glute loop to hell. If you have a broken arm, glute loops, hip thrusts, front squats, even you have to do them the way I used to. So I used to have to do them the Frankenstein, the left arm, and Olympic lift the right arm. I would do them like this. The fact when Lane Cannon and I did the 100 rep challenge, I did 205 for 100 singles. So that means you have to rack and re-rack every set with 205. Every single one of them. It was right after 9/11. Yeah. Lane of blessed memory. You're recovering from a wrist injury, but here's the thing. Every time my heart beats, it doesn't just go into my bicep on my right bicep because I'm doing right bicep curls. It goes through my whole body. So when you're lifting weights, all the magic, the hormones and the chemicals and the nutrients swim around that whole body all the time. Also, too, you'll notice that when you exercise, it does help you with that weird kind of depression you get when you're injured. I don't know what to call it. You can call it the woe is me thing. Oh, woe is me. I can't, a broken wrist, I couldn't tie my own shoelaces. That is, I had to have my daughter, who was she was like in the third grade, tie my shoe one morning. I was like, oh, geez, my life just, and it does, it bothers you. So lift weights wherever you can. Now, when I was recovering, I started doing a whole bunch I had this really weird dumbbell. Oh yeah, Walt Palmer gave it to me. It was an adjustable Olympic dumbbell. And I had those rusty 25s, and I put that on, and I would do this, this kind of clean and press with my right arm, so it was 61 pounds because it was an 11-pound dumbbell. I don't know why, and I just get as many reps as you could, and that's when I did dumbbell snatches at that time, not like a kettlebell snatch, but a really ugly looking one. Number one thing when you're training around an injury, whatever you can do. If obviously with this you can walk. Obviously with this you can work the other side. Obviously with this you can work your legs. Take care of your sleep. Take care of your nutrition. Lock down on the eat clean. Get rid of the junk food. Do everything you can and support your body's rehab by keep training and keep going. Okay, that's what I did. I hope that helped. I know I was all over the place, but thank you. Matt asked kind of a fun little question. Matt says, after many years of listening to your podcast and reading your books, I feel like you've given us a pretty good idea of what your nutrition strategy is and a blueprint anyone can follow. But I'm curious, what are some other diets you have tried and what were their ups and downs? Well, sure. I've done a lot, including, some tough ones like the Velocity diet, which is just 6 protein shakes a day. That was tough. But I personally in my life, there's 2 I look back on, and they probably are still fairly true to what I do now. Basically, folks, if I was to summarize, now I'm going to quote the nutritionist that spoke years ago. I know what the big deal is. Eat protein, eat veggies, and drink water. Okay, that's true. But for me, if I focus on protein and fruit, that seems to answer all my questions. This morning for breakfast, I had eggs, cottage cheese, a protein smoothie that has 3 different berries, an apple, and a mandarin orange. So, I had 5 different fruits for breakfast. For whatever reason, protein and fruit just seem to make me happy. Now, obviously, I eat a lot of vegetables. It's a rare dinner that I don't have, protein and 5, 6, 7, 8 different vegetables in a bowl. In fact, we call the meal bowls. Often throwing different bean varietals in there to get more fiber and protein. But it's chicken thighs and garbanzo beans, arugula salad, rocket for my international friends, broccoli slaw, and anything else I can throw in there. Love it. But there's 2 that I loved. The first was Atkins. Now, I loved Atkins. The problem I had with Atkins is, first off, the problem everyone has with Atkins is nobody reads or follows directions. Everyone's an expert, but no one reads. The first 2 weeks of Atkins, yes, are basically, meat and eggs. Okay. And it's crystal clear, but it ends after that. And his idea was you were overcarbing for so many years. Let's undercarb for 2 weeks and just get that transition. I loved Atkins. And so basically for me, Atkins turned out to be protein and veggies, which gets us right back to what I've been talking about the whole time. So I liked Atkins. What I didn't like about Atkins is when they started bringing out Atkins bread, Atkins pancakes, Atkins croissants. I mean, come on. For most people I know, easily accessible grain, cheap, the cheap grains here in the United States, the cheap corn, soy. I mean, I'm not being crazy or anything. They are really much cheaper. Woman told me not long ago that it truly is cheaper for her to give her kids fast food than it is to make dinner. And I thought, I don't know about the math on that, but she was she was convinced it was true. But the one I love, my favorite of all time, is what we used to call MLB, meat, leaves, and berries. And basically, if it's also called green face in some places, if it's green, or if it ever had a face, like chicken, turkey, fish, they have a face. Okay, whatever. I loved it. I love MLB. I loved it. And I even figured out a way to do cyclical ketogenic dieting on MLB. That's Lyle McDonald's great insight for throwers and lifters. Whew. Cyclical ketogenic dieting, that's where basically 5 days a week you go almost zero carbs, and then you carb up. Well, on meat, leaves, and berries, it's really pretty easy. You eat meat, or we used to call it meat salad. I would chop up steak or chicken or turkey and toss it in a big bowl of vegetables. And then when the weekend came around, you just pile up the fruit. And it worked really well for me as a thrower. But those would be my favorite two. Fortunately, I never really got into ketogenic. Not that it's bad. It just. I already knew that I thrived on a lower carb environment personally. I've done all kinds of 2-week attempts diets, and then I'm saving the one I really like the best because they're very close to each other. Phil Maffetones has that great 2-week diet test, and then Rusty Moore has his fat loss boost program. It's funny because for me, I didn't get a lot of fat loss out of it, but it certainly trained me to do the things I'm doing now. But basically, the fat loss boost is about 2 weeks where it's just vegetables, and your protein source, at least at my size, was 3 chicken breasts a day. But it's all the coffee and tea and 0 calorie drinks you want in a day. I'd be pounding down Crystal Light and all kinds of other things. I loved it, man. I loved it. Mike Brown and I have done it many times together. And, but we were talking about this, and fine, I know I'm rambling, but this is an important point. A couple weeks ago, we were talking about why did we never do well with the fat loss boost? And the question just hung in my head. And then I look back, and when I was doing the fat loss boost, I was always trying to up the intensity to lose fat. So instead of just a rucking vest, I had heavy hands and ankle weights. Instead of doing, 3 sets of 5, I'd do 25 sets of 5, or that's exaggeration, but you get the point. 10,000 swing challenge while on a fat loss boost. And instead, one of the things I've learned for fat loss, in my case, is I got to keep strict on the calories. I got to get those 10,000 steps. And when I lift weights, all I'm trying to do is lift weights, add a little bit of weight each week, add a little bit of reps or sets each week, and just nudge myself getting stronger and stronger and stronger, while I nudge my fat loss down by having a mild caloric deficit and the 10,000 steps. So, here I'm sitting, as I speak, I'm 68, and I still feel like I am learning and relearning. And I hope I keep saying that statement for the next 20 or 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. Thank you. Good question. I hope I answered it. Thank you. We have a question from Michael. Michael says, I have heard you say on numerous occasions that you love using machines sometimes for your workouts. However, I have never heard you mention any programs where machines are utilized. Do you have any favorite programs to recommend, whether from someone else or your own programs? I find it nice to change things up with machines sometimes when I have time to get to the gym regularly instead of training at home. Oh yeah. So there's basically, for me now, of course, as a kid, universal machines were universal. They were everywhere. So, my background is, there was a lot of machine use in my youth in high school. So, Art Devaney had that really interesting idea with machines. And this is what I do when I train in a normal gym. For one thing, I only have to touch each piece of equipment once, and it was called hierarchical sets. One of the problems, listen to me. Okay, get ready for this. Listen how wonderful I am. Like on some exercises, I mean, I could probably do the whole stack for 15 reps. So you have to be a little careful. But like, for example, what you do is you put a very light weight on, a lightish weight, and you're gonna have to do this a couple workouts to really dial in the numbers. And you're gonna do 15 slow reps, lightweight. And what's nice about this is you're waking up the tissues, man. Then after that 15, you pull the pin out and you go to a medium and do 8 a little bit faster. After that, you pull it out, you go heavy, and you grind out any way you can 4 to 6 to 8 reps. Nice thing about it, you're done. Hop up, go to the next machine. I do like, this is, you could tell this is from my universal training background, but I like to do that, the superset style we did in high school. So leg extension, leg curl, vertical press, vertical pull, horizontal press, horizontal pull, arm curl, tricep extension, that kind of thing. And by the way, if you just did that, that's a pretty good workout. I'm not a fan of any leg press I've ever seen. And frankly, I'm not a big fan of the innie-outie machines. If you are going to do, leg presses or innie-outies, make sure you're just doing the exercise. Just for the record, and I've been to gyms where, bleach blonde-haired guys are, stack every 100-pound plate in the gym on the leg press. And then they put their hands on, then they push up. I don't know what that exercise is, but I'm much more impressed with a 300-pound snatch or a 400-pound clean than a 1,200-pound leg press. I just don't see, what I'm seeing doesn't make sense to me for long-term health. But you can do that, or you can just do the standard. One of the issues you are going to have with machines is the reps are going to be higher. So, in a general workout, most of my life, I'd say 3 sets of 8. But if you're using machines for legs, I'm thinking more 3 sets or more, whatever you'd like to do. On the lower body, you're looking probably more in that 20s range, 20 to 25, maybe even higher. Upper body, probably 8s to 15s range. Machines are easier to move, and therefore you need probably more reps. Thank you. And by the way, I love traveling sometimes and getting those workouts in. I just simply love it. So I know the feeling of, you walk out, your pythons are pumped, and it just feels good. I understand that. Enjoy. Thank you. Our last question today. Jamie says this: I always enjoy when you talk about times where you get creative with your training and training tools. I seem to recall a story about you turning a wheelbarrow into a sled. So Nick Alo and I were training, and we were using the wheelbarrow. So Nick would sit. Now, Nick's a big kid. He's 6'4", a big kid. And so I would wheelbarrow him around. So it's a loaded carry with, a human juggling around, and you're balancing on one tire. So you're getting all this extra work. Well, of course, we broke it because we're way too big for this wheelbarrow. So I didn't really work very hard. I just basically ripped everything off, and then I stuck a rope through it, hooked the rope to my belt. The rope was probably 15 feet in toto. And then there was a whole bunch of concrete left over by the people who built the house. Of course, they were going to clean it up. It'd been 30 years. And so I threw all the concrete in there into the wheelbarrow, and it was great because one of the posts of the wheelbarrow didn't come off at once. So as you're running, occasionally it would find something to stick into. So you'd run and all of a sudden just get hit. It was just great. Very fun. My question is, do you have any other suggestions for non-traditional workout tools that can be done on a budget? I work out in my garage with just a kettlebell and a med ball. Yeah, I kind of like the idea. I used to say, Brian Oldfield, he was the world record holder in the shot, and I think he won the Superstars a couple of times. He was a good friend of mine, and we used to joke with him, and it's true, that we could go into any hardware store in the world, and Brian would figure out something to train as shot putters. One of my favorite things in a hardware store, and you got to be, it's got to have to be a pretty good supplier, but I always had a problem with sandbag training because at first I used salt, for your water softener salt, which is great until the bag breaks, and the bag always breaks, and now you got salt on your lawn, which is going to kill everything. Okay. Then, I use those little pellets that you get, to heat, so smoke for your smokers. That worked well. But what happens with the weather over time is those just start to break down. And they turn this really strange looking dust. It looks like sawdust, really. It might be sawdust. I don't know. And I never liked it. I had another friend tell me, you load it with screws. And I thought to myself, well, why don't you use rusty nails? Because, but I tell you something, and I think I might have got this from Mark, but washers. You buy steel washers and you buy them in bulk. And I guess what I loved about it, I've tried it with that small one I had, which I don't know where it is right now. But, you buy 30 pounds of washers and you put it in a small duffel bag or even a gym bag, you've got yourself a pretty good training tool. So the first thing I would say is if you have any old duffel bags that are sitting around, they have to be pretty resilient. You'd want to be made out of a good material. You can stuff it full of, washers would be the best, or anything else you can find. And now you have a nice little duffel bag. I would recommend then duct taping it around multiple times because when the things move, you'll be glad you have a little bit extra support. The next thing, of course, is backpacks. When I was teaching high school, I used to go around on the last day of school and pick up all the backpacks that the kids had just tossed willy-nilly away. And, of course, those make great rucking devices. Personally, most of the audience would never really need to go over 16 kilos, 35 pounds. So if you want to ruck, just drop that kettlebell in the back of a backpack and you should be fine. I would suggest that you put the ball at the bottom and then have the horns in the back into the lowest part of your lower back. But you can also turn a backpack into any kind of training device you like. So those three, the sled idea with the wheelbarrow, by the way, wheelbarrow, great piece of training equipment. Wheelbarrow, turn the empty shell. And by the way, you can buy the empty shells at the place over here that I'm not going to mention. You can get those green empty shells and just make your own cheap sled. You can make sandbags out of any old duffel bags you have. You can make rucking equipment out of backpacks. I'm sure you could turn it into even with lighter weights into something else. But there is one other thing I think you ought to at least consider. Go find a couple of bricks. Now, the reason I mentioned bricks, it's funny how certain tools will keep coming up in my career. Hills, Percy Sarity, Jerry Rice, Barry Sanders, all the 49ers. My best success as a coach, Hills. The other one is bricks. And that brings us back to Jerry Rice. Jerry Rice, the great American wide receiver in American football. He said part of the reason he became such a good receiver is his dad was a bricklayer, and dad would throw bricks to him. And to catch bricks, you have to have a certain style. The reason I bring this up is that I think the only person ever do the double-double at the Olympics, shot discus, was Bud Hauser. And he won the shot discus in 28 and 32. Not a very big man. Weirdly beautiful technique. His finish is as good as anybody's finish in the modern era, except, he never lifted weights. He never got paid. He was a smaller guy. But he did a lot of, he would do farmer walks with bricks. And I got to tell you, folks, if you really want to challenge your grip strength, grab 2 bricks and go for a walk. Grab 2 bricks with each side and go for a walk. It is much harder than you think. And I'm sure that someone's going to mention brick juggling to build your grip, and I'm not going to be the person to say that, but there you go. There's one more idea for you, Jamie. let me know if you think anybody else has an idea. Pop it down in the comments. I tell you, when you're talking about things, when you're talking about making your own homemade equipment, you do move away from Thomas DeLorme and progressive resistance exercise, and you get away from lab coats and people taking notes, and you get yourself back into old school training, trying to figure out ways to overcome whatever you're trying to overcome. As much as I love progressive resistance exercise, and as I do love the science of strength and conditioning, I love it. I do wish some people would understand the value of experience, but I digress. But man, when you're overcoming problems like you are, that's where your greatest gains will happen. Well, that's it for today, folks. That was episode 320. I'm always amazed when we get there. But remember, if you have questions, please email them to us at this address, podcast@danjohnuniversity.com. I certainly enjoyed the questions. Today was fun. Anytime I get to talk about catching bricks, it's always going to be a fun day, and meat, leaves, and berries. So until next time, folks, let's all keep on lifting and learning. Thank you.